Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most complex, high-stakes relationships in global politics, India and Russia. It's a friendship that was forged way back in the Cold War. But the real question is it built to last in the chaotic world we live in today? So get this. Right now, the United States is threatening its own strategic partner, India, with some really painful tariffs. And why? Because India is buying up massive amounts of discounted crude oil from a sanctioned Russia. So the big question is, why is India making this massive gamble? Why risk a trade war with its biggest partner? Okay, the numbers here just tell an incredible story. Before the war in Ukraine, Russian oil was barely a blip on the radar for India, less than 2% of its imports. Fast forward to mid-2024, and that number has exploded to over 40%. Russia is now its #1 supplier. I mean, this isn't just a small shift. It's a complete rewiring of India's energy map. But here's the thing. This isn't just about getting a good deal on oil. Not at all. To really get why India is making this bet today, you have to rewind the clock. You have to understand a friendship that was literally forged by war. So the groundwork was laid pretty early on, right after India's independence. The Soviet Union consistently had India's back at the UN, using its veto power to block resolutions on the very sensitive issue of Kashmir. But the one that changed everything, came in August 1971, when they signed the Treaty of Peace, Friendship, and Cooperation. Now, this is straight out of a Cold War thriller. Picture this. It's December 1971. A war for Bangladesh's liberation is raging. The U.S. sends a massive naval fleet led by the aircraft carrier USS Enterprise to intimidate India. The UK sends its fleet too. India was completely cornered. So India activated a secret clause in that new friendship treaty. And what happened next was unbelievable. The Soviets immediately sent their own nuclear-armed warships and submarines to block the American and British fleets. That single act, coming at a moment of what felt like an existential crisis, forged a level of trust in the minds of Indian leaders that, frankly, is still there today. It was a debt that would never be forgotten. And that historical trust, it translates directly into what we see today. This bond isn't just some sentimental story from the past. It's an unbreakable defense bond that is literally hardwired into India's military machine. Just look at the scale of this. We're talking about roughly 45% of India's most important military hardware. We're talking fighter jets, tanks, the whole shebang. It's all of Russian or Soviet origin. You literally can't just unplug that overnight. It's impossible. And this is the crucial part, right? This goes way beyond India just going shopping for weapons. It's a deep, deep collaboration. Russia has consistently been willing to do joint production and transfer technology, like with the famous BrahMos missile, which is exactly what India wants for its Make in India policy. That's something Western partners have, let's be honest, often been a lot more hesitant to offer. And the S-400 missile system deal? Oh, this is a perfect example. The U.S. was putting on massive pressure, even threatening sanctions, but India went ahead anyway. And now, for the first time ever, Russia's actually setting up factories inside India to maintain these systems and make spare parts. This just weaves the two even closer together, making that bond even harder to break. Okay, but the world isn't static, right? Things have changed. And this time-tested relationship is now facing some of its biggest challenges ever, because the old certainties are just fading away. The ground is shifting under everyone's feet, and what some analysts are now calling a managed decline in this partnership. And the biggest elephant in the room, it's China. As Russia gets more and more isolated from the West, it's getting closer and closer to Beijing. Now, for India, that's a huge problem. See, India is a key part of the US-led Quad, an alliance created specifically to balance out China. So there's this growing fear in New Delhi that, in a future fight, their old friend Russia might not stay neutral. And if you follow the money, the story gets even more complicated. India's trade with the US is incredibly profitable. They have a massive surplus. But on the flip side, their trade with China, Russia's new best friend, is horribly imbalanced. We're talking a huge deficit. So the economic realities are pulling India in a totally different direction from its old ally. And you can see this playing out in where India buys its weapons. I mean, look at this chart. Russia is still the biggest supplier, no doubt, but its share of the market has been cut by more than half in just a decade. India is actively, and I mean actively, diversifying. They're buying more from France, from Israel, from the US, clearly trying to reduce that old over-reliance on Moscow. So all of this brings us to the absolute core of India's foreign policy today. How on earth do you navigate this insane web of dependencies and rivalries? Well, you do it by walking a strategic tightrope, a real high-wire act with absolutely no safety net. India's answer to this whole puzzle is a concept they call strategic autonomy. And the idea at its core is pretty simple, even if it's really hard to pull off. You talk to everyone. The US, Russia, Europe, the Global South. You engage with them all to push your own national interests, but you refuse to get locked into anybody's camp. And what does that look like in the real world? Well, it's a three-part game plan. First, you diversify your partners across the board. But then, and this is key, you also build your own systems to resist pressure. Things like creating new financial plumbing for ruby-ruble trade so you can get around the US dollar and sanctions. And all the while, you are just relentlessly engaging in diplomacy behind the scenes. So how does this alternative system actually work? Well, to get around US sanctions, an Indian company buying Russian oil pays for it in rupees. That money goes into a special account, called a Vostro account, that a Russian bank holds in India. Now, the big challenge was, what does Russia do with this giant mountain of rupees it can't really spend anywhere else? The solution? India now lets Russia invest those rupees right back into Indian government bonds and infrastructure projects, which makes the whole system much more workable. So, when you put it all together, you realize this isn't about ideology. For the people making decisions in New Delhi, this is just cold, hard pragmatism. It's about getting the energy the country needs at a price it can afford. It's about keeping its massive military running. And maybe most important of all, it's about protecting its fierce, deep-seated desire to be independent on the world stage. And that leaves us with this final, critical question. As the world seems to be splitting into two competing camps, can a great power like India really stay autonomous? Can it keep walking that line between the giants? Or, in the end, is choosing a side simply inevitable?